This last meeting of the session of the Hindu Standing Committee, I open the session. It's meeting number 29 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry and Technology, pursuant to Standing Order 108-2 on the motion updated by the committee on Friday, April 18th. The committee is meeting to study small and medium-sized enterprises. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order November 25th. Members can attend in person or remotely using the Zoom application. You know the rules that are still in force in order. So I would introduce our witnesses that are with us today. I would like to thank you for your patience. We had some speeches that upset the agenda in the House and there were votes, so thank you for being here. We have as an individual Mr. Jean-Guy Couillard, Mr. Vincent Rousson, who is Rector, Université du Québec, and Abitibi-Témiscamingue. We have the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, Mr. David MacDonald, Senior Economist, and from the City Howe Institute, we have Mr. Benjamin Takis. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. And we have from the Fédération des Chambres de Commerce du Québec, we have Mr. Mathieu Lavigne, Director of Public and Economic Affairs, and Audrey Langlois, Advisor, Workforce and Economic Affairs. Thank you for being here. So I would give the floor for 5 minutes to Mr. Couillard. I'm Jean-Guy Couillard. I've been working at Desjardins since 2001, and I was working in a grocery store. Unfortunately, the quality of the sound is not sufficient for interpretation. Some adjustments might need to be made. So, after 3 weeks only, I started to have. I'm sorry to interrupt. Yes, the quality of your sound is really bad. Maybe you need to raise your mic a little bit so we can hear. The interpreters are having a hard time following you. Maybe a little bit higher between your nose and your mouth. Let's just try and see. After 3 weeks of work, my health started to get better, physically and mentally. Yeah, it's a little better. Yes, thank you. So, where I work, there is a serious shortage of work since I'm retired. They quickly asked for my assistance in recruiting new employees through my contacts of retirees. Since then, I have discussed with several retirees to come back to work. I have about 100 contacts, and I was able to only have 3 people agree to come back to work. And these about 75% of the people refuse to come back to the workforce because they're afraid of paying high taxes. I just completed my filings for this year, and I had to pay over $2,500 to both levels of government. Most people in my age group will have the same amount to refund if they were working. And there are also deductions on my paycheck. So we're trying to find solutions that could be efficient, and that could, maybe the best solution is not to impose income taxes on retirees who go back to work. The presence of retirees on the labor force will have the advantage of maintaining their health for a longer period and reduce health care costs. Health care economies could become bigger in the government or have a bigger impact than tax returns might have on the revenue of seniors. According to the press, it costs a day in the hospital costs $1,309, and intensive care $3,776 a day. Many retirees decided to go back. They want to go back to work if nothing is done. they would go back home because they're paying very high taxes. In a short time, a high number of people will be retiring, and the impact will be to have a more significant labor shortage. Retirees are a solution because they have a lot of experience and they're quite rigorous and often on time. Another important thing, people receiving old age security and the guaranteed income security will not be penalized. The others that have retirement plans should not be penalized either. In enterprises that are employees that are close to retirement age and that would stay at work if they could avoid taxes. So this is a solution that could be applicable quickly with qualified workforce. I think it's important that the project should start for 2022. My employer supports my project 100% because he thinks it'll be useful for him and for other companies around the country to earn. Removing income taxes from employers of over 75 years would be a profitable solution for everybody. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I appreciate the time. And my employer sent us a letter to certify the process. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kuya. So, Mr. Rousson from Abitibi-Témiscamingue, you have the floor. Thanks for receiving me this afternoon. Abitibi-Témiscamingue is a region that has serious labor shortfalls, especially in the mining sector. Right now, there are over 4,000 shortages. The unemployment rate has only 3.4%. That's 2 points above the average. There's been an increase in the people dropping out of work. Over the next 10 years, we'll be losing over 8,000 workers. Employers often resort to fly in, fly out. This practice could become generalized if nothing is done and limit the economic development of Quebec regions. Since the labor is a problem around the country, the solution is to look towards immigration or international students ending their studies. Right now, there is an inconsistency between the Canadian and Quebec policies. Quebec universities have rejection rates similar to 2015, about 30%. The gap between our universities is still growing. Right now, 52% of applications for Quebec universities are rejected, compared to 34% for universities around Canada, a gap of over 20%. The refusal rate for Tunisian students went from 33% in 2016 to 50% of rejections in 2020. Amongst all Quebec universities, there is a network of Quebec universities bringing together all the regional universities that suffer the most from these refusals. The rate of rejection for visa applications for foreign students going to these universities has gone over 60% and even 90%. For some countries, for Anglophone universities, they have lower rates. In 2019, McGill had a rate of only 9% compared to 23% for Concordia and 27% for Bishop. In Abitibi, the situation is even worse for CEGEPS. It's 75% of refusal rates. In professional teaching, the rate reached 95% for students, foreign students not coming from France. There is also a disparity between the acceptance rates for certificates in other regions compared to Quebec. In 2019, 12,192 certificates were given to Algerian students, and only 2,619 had a study permit. Several factors determine that, but the financial capacity of students is the main reason brought forth. Over 50% of our students receive scholarships covering their study cost, but they still get rejection. Immigration officers can reject an application if it questions the goodwill of the applicants. That's discriminatory because they're not based on objective facts, rather than they're based on perceptions. And there are documents in the federal court that don't work because they don't really have notes, written notes, and they are required to take into account certain elements. These are generally not Francophone or African candidates that are rejected, but people from countries where there is political instability. For the same country, permits are given to students that attend English universities but are rejected for students applying to Francophone universities. Canada should not deprive itself of qualified people. If people can stay in the country and participate in the development of the country. My university has a strong increase in the number of international students, similar to the other universities. And it promotes the strategy for international education promoted by the government of Canada. We're a real solution. We have highly trained labor force for the businesses, service industries. Our foreign students are culturally and linguistically integrated in their communities, and they contribute to the demographic base and actively participate in economic development. So it's imperative that the Canadian government, while looking for solutions in labor shortages, should take into account universities and immigration tools, accelerate the process for granting study permits so that foreign students can play a decisive role in the economic development of our country. Thank you. I'm now ready to take your questions. Thank you, Mr. Rousson. Now the Canadian policy.
Speak to you today on their study of small and medium-sized businesses. The last 2 years have been a difficult time for small businesses in Canada. However, businesses across this country received unprecedented government support through the wage subsidy, rental subsidies, and the Canada Emergency Business Account, or CEBA loans. Business supports, in fact, represented the largest government spending category during the pandemic, with worker supports coming in second and healthcare expenses coming in a distant third. Now the problem for business isn't applying for government supports, but rather finding employees to help customers who are lined up out the door. It's important to point out, though, that there remains a very clear relationship between the wages offered for new jobs and the job vacancy rates. That is to say, a business offering higher wages for positions will have fewer of those positions remain open. Furthermore, workers in hard-hit sectors like food and accommodation who were laid off in the initial months of the pandemic weren't idle. Instead, they used CERB benefits to move into other sectors that remained open and needed workers. The net result is that when the economic reopening happened in earnest in the fall of 2021, those workers were no longer available to fill previous positions because they were already employed elsewhere, likely for higher wages. Expansion of the Temporary Foreign Worker Program has been the most recent federal government answer to high job vacancy rates. Specifically, the government allocated new funding to process more applications faster. Workplaces can now have 20% of their workforce comprised of temporary foreign workers, up from 10%. Workers can be kept much longer, up to 270 days, and temporary foreign workers will be allowed in areas with unemployment rates that exceed 6%. The danger of this expansion is that we will suppress workers' wages, which would have otherwise risen to attract new workers. Workers' wages have risen by 3.9% in the past year, which is well behind inflation, which has stood at 6.8% over the same period. More temporary foreign workers will work to suppress those wage gains, particularly for low-wage workers. For temporary foreign workers who come to Canada to work, the program as structured creates dangerous power imbalances between the employer and the employee, favoring the employer. The basic workers' rights that Canadians enjoy are either explicitly or explicitly denied to temporary foreign workers. For example, the basic right to change a job in order to obtain better wages or better conditions is denied, and complaints about workplace treatment can easily be met with extradition. Keeping wages low by importing workers who have been stripped of basic workplace rights is inconsistent with the government's strategy for an inclusive labor market. As a country that welcomes a diversity of immigrants, a better approach to obtaining new workers would be to accelerate the process of accepting new Canadians. These new Canadians can and should be drawn from the pool of temporary foreign workers who would prefer to live in Canada permanently. Without the right suppressions inherent in the temporary foreign worker program, new Canadians are freer to bargain for higher wages and better working conditions, and generally do. There is no doubt that higher wages will render some low-margin employers incapable of competing in a post-pandemic world. Higher business debt following the pandemic will further pressure some businesses as interest rates rise. But the reality is that business bankruptcy rates were far lower during the pandemic than they were prior to the pandemic, entirely due to federal supports. But a well-functioning economy is one that experiences the renewal of businesses, where some close and new ones take their place. The closure of one business frees up resources in the form of space, workers, and equipment for new businesses that may be more viable. This is a desirable and necessary feature of our economy. For some businesses, there may not be a viable path forward. And for those businesses, we need to accelerate, not delay bankruptcies, to settle obligations and hopefully allow entrepreneurs to go on to start new businesses in the future. We should encourage an off-ramp, as it were, for businesses that are no longer viable as wages rise. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur MacDonald. Je passerai.
Thank you, Mr. MacDonald. Now to the City House Institute, Mr. Dacus.
To speak to this committee today. And your study is going to contain many issues that the City House Institute has covered over recent years. There are many topics I can cover in the Q&A, such as tangible steps to solve interprovincial trade and support Canadian supply chains, what can be done on regulatory requirements, labor shortages, and inflationary pressures. And no surprise, these limitations on the productive capacity of the Canadian economy are all tied together. So your study linking these themes and how they affect SMEs in particular will be a really important one. So I look forward to that. But I want to focus my remarks today on an element of your study on the Competition Act that is particularly on the federal agenda. Now, the last time I was here, I discussed the issues with the proposed amendments to the Competition Act via the Budget Implementation Act, or BIA. The BIA appears to be rushing towards passage, so my comments on that a month ago stand for your study. But now I want to look forward. And the government's committed to bringing in more Competition Act reforms, so here's what I suggest it do in your study that can and should advocate for, with a lens on how competition reform can help small business. First of all, is on process, and that we need a proper panel and publicly discussed paper, unlike the reforms to the Competition Act in the BIA that were landed on people at the last second. We need to fix that process. But now on substance, here are a few ideas that you should be thinking about. As authors David Rosner and Julie Rosenthal have argued in the City House memo, we need to further develop case law to improve enforcement of the Competition Act against abusive dominance. This underdevelopment stems from two restrictions in the Act. First is that the Act gives the Commissioner of Competition a near monopoly on enforcing action against monopolies. The BIA expands private access as a way of fixing this irony. But much further action is going to be needed in a few regards to make this change work, in particular for small businesses. So what this committee should be recommending is to remove the Competition Tribunal's exclusive jurisdiction to hear abusive dominance cases. Now, there are many reasons I can briefly list here that I can get to if we have time in Q&A, if interested, such as one reason is speeding up the courts, which is going to especially improve access for small firms, and making competition law more inclusive of other voices. The BIA also gave a new power that if a claimant business successfully established the elements of abusive dominance, the Competition Tribunal can order the firm to, abusing its dominant position to cease its unlawful behavior, but also to pay an administrative monetary penalty, or AMP. Now, as I mentioned in the last meeting, the new AMP amount that was created by the BIA is potentially unconstitutional. But on top of that, in a very perverse setup, the AMP would go to the government and not the business that successfully demonstrated that it had suffered competitive injury. And there's no provision for the government to transfer any of that AMP to the damaged business's compensation. And what's important is that, especially for small businesses, this may not be sufficient incentive to commence proceedings. And without the ability to obtain damages, a victimized firm is left less than whole. Now, in a memo to the Competition Law Committee released today by the C.D. Howe Institute, author Peter Glossop argues that we need to adopt damages going right to plaintiffs. Now, there's a balancing act that we need to have of including safeguards, both to protect small firms to be able to afford the litigation they need to take against dominant competitors, but also to prevent vexatious litigation. And Australia has a model in Section 82 of its Competition and Consumer Act that I can elaborate on if of interest. Finally, notably absent from reform discussions so far, as the former head of the Competition Bureau, George Addy, has argued for in the C.D. Howe Institute memo, is a major unaddressed legislative gap about the absence of oversight, accountability, and transparency of the use of the resources provided to the Commissioner of Competition. Now, police forces across Canada are subject to some form of civilian oversight, such as with police commissions, whose members are not serving officers, and they review budgetary decisions and priorities. And there's no equivalent body for the Competition Bureau. It's time for such a body with more input from Parliament on the Bureau's priorities, but importantly, not specific enforcement decisions. But again, I can get into detail on if there's interest. Now, there's much more I could get into in the Competition Act reforms that are needed that this committee could be looking at, such as a middle ground suggestion on amendments to the efficiency defense, why Canada should consider adopting something akin to the UK Digital Regulators Cooperation Forum as its approach to digital economy regulation, and what the right purpose of competition policy is. I'll stop there and look forward to questions if we have time.
Merci beaucoup. Je passerai maintenant.
Thank you. So, Mr. Lavigne from the Fédération des Chambres de Commerce du Québec. Thank you, Mr. Chair of the committee, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. I'm Matthew Lavigne, Director of Public and Economic Affairs. I'm accompanied by Audrey Langlois, Labor and Economic Advisor. Thanks for receiving us by video conference through Montreal. FCC, that, as you well know, is an organization that brings together 125 chambers of commerce and represents about 50,000 businesses. Our members operate in all sectors of the economy and throughout Quebec and all regions. As the largest network of business people and companies in Quebec, we also act as a provincial chamber of commerce, putting forward the interests of its members. Thank you for inviting us to this study on labor shortages and the productivity of our small and medium-sized businesses. This is a subject that is obviously at the heart of our work. I'll quickly highlight some of the findings and especially some of the recommendations regarding some of the aspects that are part of the study, but be rest assured that we will be able to address other subjects if you have time. So let's begin with the labor shortage. It's the first and foremost concern. The issue of labor shortages, for example, last March we had 259,000 and 170,000 vacant positions in Quebec, double the number of vacancies before the pandemic at the end of 2019. The causes of the shortages are multiple, hence the importance of employing a whole arsenal of measures, but I would like to draw your attention to three of them, starting with the attraction of qualified foreign workers. Our members are very concerned about the slow processing of immigration applicants. While the processing time for Quebec skilled worker is 32 months in Quebec, the waiting time for a similar program in another Canadian province will soon be 6 months. So speeding up the process of immigration applications and issuance of work permits should be an ongoing priority for the federal government. And I also support what the rector of the University of Quebec and Abiti Tamiskaming said earlier. We think along the same line, certainly. So immigration is not the only answer to the labor shortage. It is also necessary to better train on a continuous basis, to encourage the unemployment to return to work quickly, and to encourage experienced workers who wish to do so to stay a little longer in the market. Therefore, we propose the introduction of a voluntary continuing education savings plan modeled on the registered education savings plan. Also to proceed with a true global revision of the employment insurance plan in order to refocus on its primary mission, temporary income support, accompanied by support measures promoting a quick return to employment, and to increase the income threshold that does not reduce the guaranteed income supplement, GIS. The tax regulatory and administrative burden is another important barrier to the growth of our SMEs. Here, the federal government can act, starting with moving quickly to implement former Bill C-208 to facilitate intra-family business transfers. The current tax rules make life difficult for SMEs and hinder family businesses' succession. Another source of pitfalls for entrepreneurs is the duplication of legislation and accountability between the federal and Quebec levels. For several years, we've been asking the federal government to initiate discussions with Quebec government in order to reach an agreement on the issue of a single tax return, which is a pragmatic and innovative manner focusing exclusively on the taxpayers' interests. Secondly, we suggest that the federal government take a cue from their Quebec counterparts who, for the second year in a row, have introduced an omnibus bill on regulatory relief. Each year, we could eliminate and simplify some of these documents to make life easier for our entrepreneurs. In closing, I thank you for seriously considering the productivity and labor issues of our SMEs. Thank you. I welcome your questions. Thank you, Mr. Lavigne. So we'll start the round of questions. Just to remind colleagues that we have to end this meeting by 5:30 if we want to have 30 minutes to study the report on quantic informatics. So maybe shortened questions. We'll have 2 rounds, maybe the first part of this second round. So Mr. Deltel, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome colleagues participating in this interesting session. Mr. Lavigne from the Chambre de Commerce. There are several issues I would like to quickly raise with you. Bill 208, which was adopted, so it's ready to go, but it's not right now. What would be some of the advantages, in your opinion, that this act would be operational right now? As you're saying, well, we're saying a bill, but we should actually say it's an act. It's an issue of equity between entrepreneurs that would like to transfer their business to members of their family. This is a very important matter because in Quebec, there's a very high number of businesses where owners are towards the end of their career, and there are young people within the family that are ready to take over, but the current tax laws make the situation penalizing for the person transferring and the person receiving. So it's imperative to quickly move ahead with that. We are pleased to see that the government at least mentioned it in the last budget, but we would like to see things move faster. Yes, we too would want things to go faster. You spoke about foreign workers who want to come to Quebec. It takes 6 months, and if they're going outside Quebec, it's 6 months outside of Quebec, 32 months if they're coming to Quebec. We know Quebec has oversight on immigration. They would like to have more powers on that area. There would be a political debate in Quebec over that. But I'd like to hear you on the fact that for about 40 years, Quebec has been working with these 2 approaches, the federal approach and the provincial approach together. But when you see that it takes a lot more time in Quebec, what explains the fact that it takes much more time in Quebec? Is it because you have 2 governments that are trying to move things forward, or is it because Quebec pays more attention to people that are coming to Quebec to settle, so it takes more time to study their cases, hence these delays? Mr. Deltel, Audrey Langlois, Economics and Labor Advisor in the CCQ. To answer your question, yes, it's jurisdictional sharing between the federal and Quebec governments. It's become a delicate, difficult subject matter. It's caused a lot of issues in the society. When it becomes hard, it's important to have discussions and come up with solutions. Right now, it's difficult to come up with a single answer to explain why these processes take too much time in Quebec. Maybe because we're still working on hard copies. some would say it's because of the thresholds of people admitted into Quebec. It's still a problem. The federal government has an important role to play right now. Either they offer similar time frames for handling these documents, similar to what happens in terms of processing time across Canada. For 90% of people, immigration is necessary to make sure that they maintain the same productivity levels and that they don't have to limit their production capacity. So we're asking the government to reduce these time frames, make them comparable to what happens across the country. So you're talking about 5 times higher numbers. I know maybe sometimes we pay more attention to certain files, but you're talking about 5 times the time it takes. It's not logical. People go to Ontario first and then they come to Quebec because it's quicker. Yes, we see that a lot of businesses have said that, especially in Abitibi-Témiscamingue and Ottawa. Workers came in and had their residency papers much faster in Ontario and the rest of Canada. So it's a difficult situation, and there are economic costs for the businesses, and also immigrants who want to stay in Quebec end up with the short end of the stick because their situation is different compared to those outside of Quebec. You spoke about experienced workers that would like to stay longer on the labor force, and there is a link with what Mr. Couillard said. Thank you, Mr. Couillard, for your personal testimony. At 78 years, you are an inspiration to all of us. You are part of a generation that worked really hard, and we understand that you would like to keep going. Mr. Couillard, you said there are retirees who want to come back to the labor force, but they wouldn't want to pay taxes. So, in your opinion, are you saying they shouldn't pay any taxes at all, or just a little bit? There seems to be an issue with Mr. Couillard's sound. I think you're on mute or maybe not properly connected. Okay, Mr. Couillard, we'll be coming back to you later once the technical issues are resolved. So I'll give you the floor now to Madame Lapointe. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today I share my time with my colleague, Mr. Askin Smith.
Mr. McDonald, you recently published a report entitled Truth Bomb, Corporate Sector Winning the Economic Recovery Lottery. And you state that the corporate profits to GTP ratio is the highest of any recovery in the past 50 years in Canada. Can you tell us, what does this mean for small and medium enterprises trying to compete with large corporations?
Okay. Well, thanks so much for the question. The study looked at all of the recessions and recoveries that occurred in Canada at any point in the last 50 years, of which there were 6. And after each one, it took the gauge of how much benefit workers versus corporate profits had obtained following that recession and recovery. Now, in some cases, workers were up. In some cases, corporations were up. What was quite unique about this recovery was how much more corporate profits were up, 3 times more than any previous recovery in Canada. So it's unprecedented in Canadian history to see this kind of concentration of the recovery of GDP going to the corporate profit side. And workers actually are slightly worse off than they were in 2019, in large part because wages haven't kept pace with rising inflation. The implications for small and medium-sized businesses is unclear. And so the way that the GDP accounts work is that corporate profits are for larger or medium-sized enterprises, and the smaller enterprises where it's more difficult to determine what is profit and what is revenue is put into a category called mixed income. And so that's not represented in this particular study. So I'm not sure what it tells us about small businesses. It might tell us something about medium-sized businesses, but it's mostly about large businesses.
Thank you. The floor is yours, Mr. Erskine-Smith.
Thanks very much. So I suppose I want to stay with Mr. McDonald. you are contradicting Service Canada, and I didn't get a clear answer from IRCC with respect to the TFW program and the impact of the TFW program in suppressing low-income wage growth. It seems obvious, though, that it would suppress wage growth, so I appreciate your answer. Do you have a comparison in any way between the low-income wage growth we've seen in the United States versus the low-income wage growth we've seen recently in Canada, and the impact of inflation specifically? Are we seeing low-income wage growth much lower in the Canadian context and certainly being outpaced to a significant degree by inflation?
Well, low-income wage growth in the Canadian context, or in the American context for that matter, is largely driven by minimum wage policy. That's often what drives up low wages in Canada. And so with respect to that, most minimum wages, provincial minimum wages, are at this point indexed to inflation. And so workers at the bottom end of the spectrum should, at year's end or when the indexation kicks in, see, increase in those wages at roughly the rate of inflation. Minimum wages in the U.S. tend to be much lower to begin with. And so, I haven't done a direct comparison to the U.S., but in terms of Canada, we will likely see at the low end at some point, probably in 2023, a rough indexation where low-wage workers are made whole in a sense versus rising inflation.
So it will eventually catch up where it's indexed. That makes sense. And with respect to the TFW program, if not using the TFW program to address labor shortage issues, what would be your answer to labor shortage issues that doesn't have that impact on suppressing wage growth?
Higher wages for workers. This is a labor market, and so sometimes employers are the ones on the winning side, sometimes workers are the ones on the winning side. Right now, workers are the ones on the winning side. The unemployment rate is low. What that means is that provides more bargaining power to workers. At present, they frankly haven't used it. Wage rates have not grown at the rate of inflation, so real wages for workers are down for the majority of Canadians. They have not they've not kept pace with inflation, and therefore they have less purchasing power now than they did at this point last year.
Because workers have to compete. Sorry, the premise that makes a great deal of sense to me is workers have to compete for jobs in a labor market where there aren't so very many opportunities, and where we have to see a situation as we do today, then it's companies that should be competing for workers.
That's right. That's exactly right. And if they compete for workers, I mean, this is a way that we would see workers' wages rise and corporate profits fall. That the higher expense for labor requires lower profits and more money towards the labor line, as it were, on the income statement. And
on that issue of corporate profits, it's confusing for my constituents certainly, and I have to admit I don't have a great answer for them when we see increased prices in grocery stores and we see increased prices at the gas pump, and then Canadians see record profits from grocery stores and from oil companies, and how to square the impact of inflation on Canadians who are struggling to get by while we see record profits from companies that seem to be profiting from this inflationary environment. How would you answer my constituents?
Well, I mean, I think that's exactly what this study says, is we're under a very unique circumstance where corporate profits have very much benefited from inflation, whereas workers' wages are far behind inflation in this initial inflationary drive that we've seen in the last year and a half. That companies are capable of increasing prices, not only to make up for higher input costs, which they are absolutely facing, but then some. And using that additional amount, which results in profits. Workers are, I think, now realizing how much higher the cost of goods are, and hopefully over time will bargain up their wages, but that hasn't happened yet. It's certainly nowhere near the rate of inflation. Workers aren't driving inflation. Corporate profits are playing a role in inflation. I mean, the bigger role, frankly, is input prices. This has everything to do with the war in Ukraine, the price of oil, the gasoline refining shortfalls in the U.S., in addition to other key inputs like fertilizer, for instance, and wheat. I mean, this is what's driving inflation. Corporate profits are playing a role in that, particularly in concentrated industries. We're seeing pricing power. Workers are not playing a role. They're way behind when it comes to inflation.
Thanks very much.
Merci. Je passe la parole.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lemire, you have the floor. Mr. Chair, Would you rather complete the previous questions, Mr. Kuya? I think you were able to solve your technical problem. If you could answer Mr. Delta's question quite briefly, maybe in about 30 seconds. To answer Mr. Delta's question, it would only be on the work that the retiree does after going on retirement. The other taxes accumulated before would still have to be paid. So to attract people, there shouldn't be any taxes imposed on those amounts. Thank you. So, Mr. Deltel, you have great common sense, and that honors you. Thank you. Mr. Lemire, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank all the witnesses here today. I would like to start with Mr. Rousson, Director of University of Quebec, and Abitibi, Témiscamingue, and also apologize for plagiarism because I think some of your statistical data last week, when we received people from citizenship and immigration, public servants, and presenting your statistics, I heard the following answers. First of all, as far as the approval rate for international students going to Quebec compared to the rest of Canada, our department always looks at ways of responding to Quebec's concerns in terms of the acceptance rate of international students. In 2021, of all students that declared English and French as official languages, 50% of those going to Quebec stated French. When you look at approval rates of people that declared French, it's similar, 41% in Quebec, 40% in the rest of Canada. The same thing for approval rates for the declared languages for Anglophones and Francophones going to Quebec. The global approval rate for Quebec is 41%, and it's about 62% for the rest of Canada. So my question is simple. How do you react faced with these statistical elements that show a strong inconsistency between Quebec and Canada, between Francophones and Anglophones? And what is the impact on the UQAT planification and profitability profile? I will start with the end. As far as the profitability, it's not only international students, foreign students. For us, it's not about profit. It's about developing knowledge, and international students play a significant role on that, and also businesses in our community. There's also a big impact on the student population, not just with us, but Rimouski and Chicoutimi universities, where we have hundreds of students admitted to our programs each year, so they have authorization letters. They receive scholarships from our professors. They receive authorization from the Quebec government, but there are refusals at Immigration Canada, so there is an impact. The processing times are very long. These students would like to be trained in the best universities in the world. They come to Canada for that very reason. And their applications are often rejected because an immigration officer decides they are not sure if the student will go back to his home country or if he would have sufficient funding for his studies, whereas they have documents stating that they have full scholarships for the duration of their studies, covering not only university fees but also their living expenses. So there seems to be a gap in understanding between the reality on the ground in our universities and what's happening in the government offices. I'm not really sure with the statistics proposed by the government right now. I can use the expression we are in some kind of a war of figures. When we have concrete, real data, when we do an analysis, we realize our data is right. There is a gap between the acceptance rate of our Francophone students compared to the Anglophone students, and the gap is widening each year between Francophone and Anglophone universities in Quebec. There are other data saying UQAT and Rwanda are third in Canada in terms of quality of university life, third in Quebec for the completion rates, graduation rates in Quebec. So this is an establishment where you do have a strategy of attractiveness based on labor force within the community, and it's part of your strategy. But in the current criteria, what we see in Immigration Canada, that is a factor that could actually be harmful beyond the linguistic aspect. Are there things that could be changed in the law to promote the temporary student programs? Yes, these students are the best ambassadors we could have. They're the best in terms of integration in Canadian community. You mentioned some statistics. I would like to add two more. In all Canadian universities, we are the first to solicit businesses to invest in fundamental and applied research in UQAT. We're the first in Canada, and we're the second in terms of intensity of research in Canada. Our professors were amongst the best in terms of seeking funds from the funding organizations in Canada so that they can give a major boost to Canadian industries. To do that, we need students with masters and PhDs. We have several from Quebec, from Canada, but we can do more with international students. And one last statistic, Mr. Lemay, compared to Ontario, we receive 2 times fewer international students in Quebec. Compared to British Columbia, we receive 3 times fewer international students in Quebec. So there is a widening gap between the Canadian provinces, and unfortunately, it's developing knowledge, research, the competitiveness of Canada at the international level that will suffer. Do I have a short question for the President of the Chambre de Commerce, for Mr. Lavigne? The labor market impact studies, do you think we should withdraw some of these limitations? Yes, we know that all professions have a deficit currently in Quebec. And market studies, an additional bureaucratic element, it doesn't really help in any way given the deficit we have. The unemployment rate is at 4.2%. The number of vacancies is about 260,000, and we think it will be about 1.4 million vacancies by 2030. So even if the shortages will continue up to 2030, we would hit a plateau. So we would still need a labor force. So the all administrative burdens, it would be a good idea to remove them. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bachrach.
Interesting discussion. I'm pleased to have a chance to sit in for it. And I'm going to direct my questions to Mr. MacDonald. To begin with, you mentioned at the outset the unprecedented levels of support that the business sector has received from the government during the pandemic. And I wonder, with the benefit of hindsight, how you would suggest the government might have structured those business support programs differently to make them more effective, perhaps a couple of key ways.
I think certainly access to the wage subsidy program itself could have easily been restricted, such that large enterprises in particular could not gain access to it. And so we wouldn't have had the kind of news stories that we had throughout the pandemic, where you find big profitable companies accessing this government program, clearly money they didn't need, and instead it should have been more focused towards small and medium-sized businesses that relied on it. But I think hopefully we're less likely to abuse the rules, as it were, and play fast and loose with the rules. And so, I mean, I think that's probably the major piece. It probably would have saved the government the most money in terms of those programs.
Now, you mentioned the dramatic recovery and expansion of corporate profits as we've come out of the worst phase of the pandemic, especially relative to other recessions. What's the main, I think you've answered this a little bit in your previous answer, but what has been the main driver behind that effect that you've witnessed?
Well, what's interesting is if you take a look at previous recessions where corporate profits come out ahead of workers' wages in terms of the breakdown of GDP, You find the most similar episode in 1981, so in the 1981 recession. And what I think is similar between the present recession and that recession was high rates of inflation, which weren't necessarily there in some of the other recessions. In the other recessions, workers came out ahead, so they captured more of GDP, whereas corporate profits captured less. And there was one recession where it was quite mixed. And so it may well be that in the initial phases of rapid inflation, the corporate sector is better capable of capitalizing on that through higher prices, and therefore converting that into higher profit margins and higher corporate profits. The danger, that economists often look to in inflation is the worker wage spiral, where workers demand higher wages and they drive inflation. What the danger here may well be is the corporate price spiral, where corporations have expanded profit margins in the initial phases in the recovery. They wish to maintain those margins, and so as a result continue to increase prices. I mean, if a company decides to increase prices by 10% because they think that's what inflation is going to be, that may well be what they create inflation to be, as they are in fact raising those prices, particularly in industries where there isn't a lot of competition.
Thank you. I've got a whole bunch of questions here, but I think I'm going to skip down to one. You mentioned that, because of the supports, there are businesses that may not have been successful that have managed to survive. And so we've seen bankruptcy rates actually drop during the pandemic, something I think many people would find counterintuitive and running counter to the popular narrative out there. But you also said that, higher wages hurt low margin employers. And so, as we see wage growth in those low wage sectors, that there needs to be an off-ramp for businesses that are unable to operate in those low margin environments. I wonder if there are certain sectors that are would be particularly affected by that. I'm thinking of friends I know who own restaurants, a notoriously low margin area of business with high risk. And how do we ensure, especially given the effect you said earlier with low-wage workers moving to higher-wage positions when they were laid off, how do we ensure that, for instance, family-owned restaurants are able to survive the pressures that you mentioned during your presentation?
I mean, I guess it depends on, that we should see a healthy level of turnover in businesses. It is not the government's responsibility to ensure that businesses never go bankrupt. I think it is the government's responsibility to ensure that those bankruptcies are orderly, so that folks can go on and start other businesses. What we don't want to do is to create businesses that fundamentally are no longer sustainable in this new environment of higher wages, or no longer sustainable due to the post-pandemic world. You could imagine that same family restaurant had located downtown Ottawa, for instance, that used to be populated by public sector workers and is no longer. And those workers may well not come back. And so, again, it's not necessarily, I don't think, the government's responsibility to maintain that business any longer than I think we realize that it's no longer viable. And this is in the end, this is going to be up to business owners to decide it's not viable. Certainly the debt that has been taken on by plenty of businesses, either through public programs like the CEBA or through private sector loans, will put further pressure on those businesses as interest rates rise and they're forced to make those payments. I think the issue in terms of those businesses is that we need to provide them with an off-ramp, that if this business is no longer viable for whatever reason, that it's time to wrap that business up so that somebody else can take that place with a new business model that hopefully makes sense in the new world. That is the painful reality, unfortunately.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll move to Mr. Cram for 6 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for joining us today. One of the most enjoyable parts about being a member of Parliament is you get to hear different perspectives from different parts of the country about how we can solve many of the common problems that this country has. I was particularly interested by the proposal from Mr. Couillard. Mr. Couillard, you said that the government should not impose income tax on retirees who go back to work. That's an idea I hadn't thought of before, to be honest. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on your proposal. Are you saying, is your proposal for all taxes or just an income tax from work, or how exactly would your proposal shape up? Monsieur Couillard, the floor is yours. I believe you're on mute, Monsieur Couillard.
Ou-
There we go.
Okay. Now,
Sorry about that. It's only on work revenue, work income that people would earn after they go back to work. The taxes on the previous amounts would remain. It only applies to work they do after retirement. Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much. And do you have an idea in mind as to how many years one must be away from work before one could qualify for your proposal?
c'est immédiatement.
Immediately the person goes on retirement, be it they continue to work after retirement. The minute they're on retirement, every penny they earn after that would not be taxable.
And so that sounds like a very short retirement, if I could say so. I was wondering if so would there have to be a particular age criterion for one to qualify?
It's from 65 years and over when people go on retirement. Those that are 65 and over, if they take their retirement on 65 years and they work, there is no tax on that. If they go back to work, or if they get to 70 and they go back to work, there is no tax on that income.
Monsieur Couillard, I didn't quite understand from your opening statement. What line of work do you work in, and did you work in?
I worked as at Desjardins, and I went on retirement from there. And then I worked as an independent for 15 years. I stopped for 2 years, and I wasn't feeling good. My doctor said, well, maybe you should be more active, do some exercises. And the cooperative where I'm working currently had labor shortages, so I went back to work for them to lend a hand. And it wasn't an issue of salary. It was to help me maintain my ship. And right now we need people, so we're trying to encourage retirees to get back to work, to maintain their health, and also resolve some of the labor shortage issues. So the reason they don't want to come back, they're saying, well, we don't want to pay taxes. If we have to pay taxes, it's no use going back to work.
The committee has heard in the past that there's a higher level of job satisfaction when senior workers can mentor younger workers who are just entering the workforce. Can you elaborate if you share that view?
Could you repeat that? I'm not sure.
Opportunity to mentor younger workers since you have returned to work.
Oui.
Yes, I mentor younger employees. There are not too many who want to come to work. Either they're too young or they don't want to work in those environments, but we are forced to find retirees too, and they say, well, we are not going to come because we are reluctant to pay income taxes. Thank you, Mr. Cram. Thank you, Mr. Couillard. And now Mr. Erskine Smith.
Thanks very much. I want to go to Mr. Dacus. You mentioned interprovincial trade. And I've heard some experts speak about the need to incentivize provinces. We've tried to have roundtables, we've had discussions, we've had consultations, and still there are many barriers. Has CD Howe done any work about what incentives might look like to spur greater interprovincial trade and to reduce barriers?
Yes, we need to encourage provinces to welcome being sued. Let me explain. If you're the minister of Ontario, whatever, agriculture or some other line ministry, you've got specific regulations that your incumbent, your constituents support. Every regulation is there for a reason. So you have no incentive to remove barriers that protect your constituents, your stakeholders, when they block people from other jurisdictions who don't vote for you. So there's no internal force that is going to take these down. So what we've been recommending is that the federal government introduce a fund that enables private litigants, small businesses from across the country, to have a low risk way of taking down, of suing governments that are in contravention of the CFTA, of the Canada Free Trade Agreement.
Why can I ask, why not just have a fund that would basically effectively be a transfer fund that says to provinces, reduce these barriers, you get federal cash, but the federal cash is an amount that would be less than the total economic benefit that we'd see from reducing interprovincial trade?
Yeah, the issue though is that it's very difficult to enforce this. How is the federal government going to give them this?
I gotcha.
Yeah, so you need to create the ability for companies to go out and take down these barriers themselves
and litigate it. I understand, change the rules of the game. Although the Supreme Court hasn't been so favorable, but I take the point. With respect to Competition Act reform, when you say we need to remove the tribunal's exclusive jurisdiction and to in some way speed things up through the courts, my experience litigating is that the courts are not particularly fast to begin with. Is there a sense that the tribunal itself is just overburdened and is slow, and that therefore additional administrative resources are necessary via the courts? Or is there evidence that the timeline is just very slow at the tribunal?
Yeah, my point on speed comes through where the puck's going, through private litigation, through private action. Because now you're going to have to see private action. You're going to see an increase in litigation. But that private action on competition is going to be joined up with with ongoing litigation on patents, on other IP. So these are going to be intertwined. So why are you going to have two separate lawsuits? One that's only on abuse of dominance, the tribunal only has jurisdiction on, and another one that's really the same thing on other things that other courts have jurisdiction on. These should just eventually be combined. So it's about where the puck's going, with more private litigation happening anyway.
Understood. And in that light, because one of your recommendations was to develop greater case law, presumably that's consistent with the BIA amendment, as you've mentioned, in terms of that private action that is now going to exist. When it comes to the oversight of the commissioner, this isn't an independent body. Like, this is a body that exists within ISED and is accountable to us, for example. We've had the commissioner come before us. Now, parliamentary committees can provide a certain degree of oversight, although we're not always the best at it, speaking personally at least. But what is that? What kind of oversight are you looking at when the comparators that I think you identified were independent bodies, right? These are independent law agencies that require civilian oversight. Here, it is not an independent body in quite the same way. So what would you have in mind?
A board of directors, for example, with clear mandates from Parliament, that you can talk to management about this, on their priorities, on how they're spending, but not on individual decision, not on individual enforcement decisions. A board of directors would be a very tangible step that you could create.
My last question, and by the way, if you could submit a list of these more specific proposals and changes. I know you had a submission in relation to the BIA amendments, but as we get to a broader consultation, which I expect to take place in the coming months, and it will be a longer process is by expectations. So any submission you can make to this committee would be appreciated. I want to return, though, to some of Mr. McDonald's testimony, but stay with Mr. Dacus. I actually agree with Mr. McDonald. I think we wasted unnecessarily money via the wage subsidy in a really inefficient way. But I specifically want to talk about the TFW program. And do you agree with the premise that businesses should be competing for workers, and that may well mean higher wage growth, and that we shouldn't be turning to programs like the TFW program that is important in some ways to address labor shortages, but does have this negative consequences of suppressing wage growth here in Canada?
Yeah. Frankly, the TFW is only the tip of the iceberg, and we have no information about how extensive this is. Students, foreign students, are coming from around the world, and they are treated effectively like regular workers, and so they're coming to the country, for student teaching purposes, but they are treated effectively. They're almost like temporary foreign workers, and we have no information about where these people are going, how much, what their wages are. We need to do more on this. So just see tomorrow. I'll follow up on this. That we're putting out a report that's laying out, it's either tomorrow or Thursday, laying out exactly this problem.
Okay, great. I look forward to reading it. Thanks very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Lemire. La parole.
Thank you, Mr. Lemire. The floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Mr. Kuya. First of all, thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for your dynamism, your commitment towards your colleagues. What in your presentation you're saying there are several revenue streams that seniors have. The Quebec retirement and also employment income for seniors, and the guaranteed supplement, for example, there are cuts. We often hear that seniors end up working for nothing. In that context, is there a ceiling in terms of work? You're saying seniors should not be taxed, but could we broaden, could we put a ceiling where we understand that work done by a senior up to a certain number of hours or a certain amount to go straight into their pockets? We would only tax the work that is done after retirement or after he goes back to retirement. But if the person only receives old age security and the guaranteed income supplement, those amounts should not be touched. The amount that a person earns in terms of other revenue, a pension plan, or the other sources of income, everything, the taxation would only apply to the work he does after work, after he goes on retirement. It could be time constraint to the period of labor shortages. If it lasts 2 years or 4 years, it would be for that period, so that the labor market should stabilize. And then we could say if you work after that, you would have to pay taxes like everyone else. Yes, you're talking about pension income, and that has an impact on income. There are several elements you mentioned that seem to come from the study on eliminating prejudices. The study was carried out by provincial and federal seniors ministries. These recommendations go back several years. Do you think the federal government is taking a lot of time in coming up with concrete measures to urge or to push seniors to become more active in the labor force? Philippe Leclerc said, there's nothing worse than paying someone for doing nothing. Should we encourage seniors more? Yes, when a senior works, they maintain their good health, and the savings for the government, if he goes to the hospital, maybe he spends 3 days in the hospital, it costs about $1,600, $1,369 a day. So if he spends 3 days in the hospital, it just costs the government about $4,000. If he's working, he would work about between 10 and 20 hours a week. Maybe he can earn about $12,000 a year. He will not be earning $25 an hour. It's minimum salary. So he will only have about $3,000 to pay if he's not taxed on that, and if he's saving 4,000 on hospital bills for the government, it's a beneficial situation for the government. Thank you, Mr. Kuya, for being here. Thank you, Mr. Bachrach.
Low-wage workers who were laid off earlier in the pandemic, many of them found higher wage opportunities and were therefore not available for rehire. I've heard about this effect as well. Is there data that supports that assertion?
There is in the food and accommodation sector. There was some work that I did in the fall that looked at the number of workers who were either employed in the food and accommodation sector or were unemployed but most recently worked in the food and accommodation sector, and I define this as the size of the workforce. In the initial months of the pandemic, the workforce size didn't change. In large part, people lost their jobs, but they didn't get another job and therefore get their sector, in essence, reassigned to another sector. However, that change started in the fall and was really complete by the end of 2020, where you do see a legitimate shrinking of that sector as people get other jobs and get reassigned in the labor force survey data to another sector, in essence. Now, this didn't become evident to the employers until really the fall of 2021, when the rehiring happened in earnest. And there, you're looking for these workers who used to work for you, and you can't find them anymore, or they've got another job. And so, this certainly happened in that sector. I mean, it would be interesting to see how much this happened in other sectors. There is some limitations with respect to the labor force survey and how well you can track employees over time.
Thanks. Maybe a really quick one. You mentioned that a better alternative to the reliance on the temporary foreign worker program is to accelerate the acceptance of new Canadians. Why do you think the government hasn't employed this approach to a greater extent?
It's certainly faster to employ temporary foreign workers and to bring them in under accelerated criteria and so on. And it's what employers want. And so employers are going to push for this access to this program because it's simpler and it's easier. And they won't face the same kind of constraints they'd face if Canadian workers or new Canadians were attempting to get that same job, because those folks would be much more likely to bid up wages as opposed to accepting low wages as just a condition of employment.
Is that it? Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Thank you. I would like to thank all our witnesses, first of all, for your patience and your contributions. We're concluding our last meeting of the parliamentary session. Thank you. I would suspend so we can go in camera on the quantic informatics report, and you can reconnect. So the session is suspended. Thank you.